So you would like to switch from Windows to Linux. I have the perfect distribution for you to start out with. It's called Linux Mint. First thing you're going to need to do before we begin is have a USB drive that's at least 32 gigabytes. Preferred. It's better to have more space than not enough. You need to have Secure Boot disabled on your computer BIOS. And you also need to have either a spare hard drive, something you would actually like to install Linux Mint on, because in this tutorial this will not be used to teach you how to dual boot between Windows and Linux Mint. This is just a complete install Linux Mint. That tutorial will be for a later date, and I do apologize for the inconvenience. Things to note: when you have Linux Mint, you have XFCE Edition, Mate Edition, and Cinnamon Edition. Those are your desktop environments, and I personally just prefer the Cinnamon Edition. So what you're going to do is go to the download link that's listed below and click download, and find the mirror that is closest to you and download it from there. After that's done, it should be in your downloads folder. And, well, okay, you're thinking, cool, now I have the ISO. What do I need next? How do I actually flash it? How do I get it onto the flash drive to boot up on? And that's where something like Balena Etcher or Rufus comes. It allows you to flash the ISO to your flash drive so you can plug it into your computer, go into your BIOS, and click the setting to actually launch the live version, which will be shown. Well, as much as I can. I can't for the life of me get my BIOS to actually show up when I try to record, even with a capture card. So I'm going to try to use my phone camera, and I do apologize in advance because that is not going to be very good audio or video quality, but I do try my best. So say you want to go with Balena Etcher. The link in the description will be down below, but you're going to hit the button that says Download Etcher, and you're going to have a list of options. If you're on Windows, you're going to go ahead and click either portable or installer. The portable is just the application itself. You don't need to install it, and the installer installs it on your computer. I personally prefer the installer, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel that because I already have everything downloaded. And as for Rufus, you can just hit either one. Portable is the same as Balena Etcher. It has everything ready. You don't need to install it on your computer. At this point, I'm going to show you how it installs Balena. So when you open up the setup application, just hit I agree, and it'll take care of the rest for you. A very important thing to note with Linux Mint, you do need a 64-bit computer. If you are using 32-bit, this is not the guide for you. It needs to be 64. So once you get Balena Etcher open up, make sure you have the flash drive that you want to flash your ISO to plugged into your computer at this point. And you're going to go ahead and hit the flash from file, go to the directory that has the Linux Mint download, and hit open. Next, you want to hit select target. Make sure you select the correct USB flash drive. If you have multiple devices plugged in, you need to make sure that you pick the right USB device, because it will just delete every last bit of data on that flash drive. So you want to make sure you have the right one that you want to use for this. I made that mistake once. I cannot stress it enough. Make sure you choose the right one. And at that point, hit select one, or select how many flash drives you want to flash it to, and hit flash. It'll say Windows Command Processor for Microsoft. Hit yes to verify it, and it will begin to flash the ISO to your USB drive. This also can take anywhere amount of time. It also depends on what USB ports you actually have it plugged into, and it depends on the device itself. If it's USB 3.2, USB 3.0, or USB 2, the time varies. This flash drive is a USB 3.2.1 device, so it's going to be a little bit faster than, say, USB 2. At this point, it will validate the flash from the ISO to the USB. You could skip this if you dare to wish and live dangerously, but I suggest letting it validate before we continue on with the next step. At this point, if it flashed successfully, you can shut down your computer and continue on to the next step. And I will see you there. I'm also going to do a quick, this is going to have 2 segments. You do not need to flash your ISO twice. This is just for the people who decide they want to use Balena. I'm going to do another segmentation of the video that is for Rufus in just a moment. This section is just a continuation of the Balena Etcher. This one is for the Rufus. So go to the website and download Rufus, and you should see it inside of your download folder. Go ahead and launch it, hit yes, and you'll get a page that looks like this. Make sure your device is shown up correctly and you select the right one. At this point, you can go into the boot selection. What you want to do is hit select and Linux Mint the ISO that you downloaded previously. Hit open, leave all of this as the default, and hit start. And you can write it as an ISO image or a disk image. File copy. One for copies of files, one just does a flat disk image. For Linux Mint, I'm just going to use the ISO image mode and hit OK. It needs to be connected to the internet so I can download the correct system Linux and hit yes. And at this point, it'll tell you all data on device, which will be your flash drive, will be destroyed. Hit OK to continue. I'll delete everything on it and then copy everything over. I do note that Rufus is a little bit slower. Okay, that's an understatement. Rufus is a lot slower than Balena Etcher in my opinion. At this point, your flash drive is ready and you can go ahead and close and continue on to the next step. Now say you have newer hardware like Asus in this case for my ROG Zephyrus 15. What I would do is press F2 at the start and it should boot me into a menu that looks like this. What you're going to do is hit F7 for advanced options, go into security, secure boot, enter, and secure boot control set to disabled. After that, you can actually press F7 to go back in easy mode, F8 for the boot menu, and select the flash drive that has your Linux Mint distro on it, and press enter. And you see we have the option for the focus. This is a terrible camera. For Linux Mint to start the live distro or to install. Sometimes you have a computer that doesn't let you disable secure boot. So say I go to settings and I have no option to change this. What you have to do is go into security, set a supervisor password, and confirm it, and hit enter. Changes have been saved. Make sure you write this password down. You're gonna need it. At this point, go into boot, press enter, and hit disable. It's that easy. And then you can go supervisor password and put the password you just did. And so you can see we don't have to put in a password on boot, but we also have secure boot disabled. Now if you see this, you might have Windows Boot Manager first, so what you're going to want to do is press F6 or F5 to make sure to press light, which is for Linux Mint in this case, is actually shown. At that point you can F10 to save changes, and it should boot directly into the Linux Mint distro, or at least the options. And as you can see, it did, minus the glare. And that's how you do it on Acer or older BIOSes. show you how to do it. So start Linux Mint 2.1, 21.1 cinnamon 64-bit. Go ahead and do that. Hit enter. At this point in time, it will take a moment to show up. It's going to be a little bit slower due to the fact that I have this running inside of a virtual machine. If you're following the tutorial, there's a really good chance you're doing this on actual hardware. Since I'm using a virtual machine, I'm automatically going to be connected to the internet. But what you're going to want to do is go down to this. There's going to be a connect to wireless button, and select your internet and connect to it. It's going to make the installation a lot easier. At that point in time, once you're connected to the internet, you're going to want to hit the install Linux Mint button. Oh, technically it's a desktop icon. It will take a minute to load. It might not, it might be faster. It really does depend on your computer speed. At this point in time, you want to make sure you have the language that you prefer and hit continue. And then make sure your keyboard layout is correct. Mine would be English US, English US. That's exactly what it defaults to. I personally installed multimedia codecs since I watched a lot of movies on it. I highly recommend doing it. It's a little bit of space, but it saves you a lot of functionality later down the line that you might need. At this point in time, you could use the erase disk and install Linux Mint or something else depending on your needs. I'm just going to hit erase disk and install Linux Mint. And then it'll ask you if the changes that it will make to the disk are correct. I'm going to hit continue. At this point in time, I'll ask you where you are. This is for your time zone. New York's okay for me, so I'm going to go ahead and continue using New York. At this point in time, you can select your username. Your name will be what it inputs as your username. So say I type in Mark. I'll make my username Mark. I just use user, and then you can name your computer. This will be whatever it shows up on the network. And then make a password. Yours doesn't have to be this short. This is just for tutorial purposes. You can have it log in automatically, or you can have it require your password to log in. In this case, I'm going to do login automatically. And you can also have the option to encrypt your home folder, which is all, say, your downloads, documents. I personally don't, but it's a nice security thing to do. At this point, it will copy the files over from the flash drive, which will be plugged into your computer, to your SSD, hard drive, NVMe, and depending on how large your disk space is and what you're using, this can take anywhere from, I'd say, 5 minutes all the way up to an hour. Really large, really slow hard drive. It also depends on how much RAM you have and your CPU. There's a whole variety of things that could be related to the speed. It'll give you the option to continue testing or restart now. And for this sake, you can hit restart now. Because this is just a VM, I'm going to completely exit out of this process and install it on my actual hardware. And I will be right back on what to do after you install it. So we now have Linux Mint installed. So we're going to go ahead and do the welcome setup, and we're going to hit let's go. You can change your desktop colors now. I personally prefer the green and dark mode. You can change your panel layout. System snapshots is something I set up, so type in your password. I just use the default for everything. It will take a second to estimate the system size. Now I'm going to save it to where it currently is. and I usually hit finish. So now you have time shifts enabled. Driver manager, this is very important if you have NVIDIA drivers or any other drivers, mostly NVIDIA, I believe it is 4. It will actually check for the most up to date. Please note that NVIDIA driver 525 is a proprietary driver, but if you use a capture card, I find it works best in the open source one. So hit apply changes, type in your password, and it will download and install the driver. This will depend on your download speed and also your hardware on how fast it will take. At this point, after it's done downloading, it will install the driver for you. That is the best part about Linux Mint. Everything is just so simple out of the box. At this point in time, it will tell you that you need to restart your computer in order to complete the driver changes. Make sure you do that, and then in this case, I will do that real quick and be right back. Now that we have our drivers up to date, we're going to go ahead and do the update manager. It's going to say what it does, hit OK, and it'll tell you that there's a new version of the update manager available. Hit apply the update, type in your password, hit enter. It will download the files and then install it and then relaunch. At this point in time, you can check to see if a local mirror is faster. This works just fine for me. And what you're going to do next is hit install updates. It will tell you what changes are being made and what are being installed. After that point, hit OK and type in your password. At this point, it will download the files, and it has this nice little UI for you to be able to see what's being downloaded and what is done already. Please note, depending on your download speed, this might take a while, and it also depends on how many packages are needing to be updated. After downloading, it will install everything for you and uninstall the old versions. You won't have to do anything, and because we updated the system, you need to reboot. So I'm going to reboot real quick and be right back. After updating, go through your system settings, go through all of them, the ones that you know you want to change. For me, first thing I usually do is check the display and make sure the refresh rate's correct. After that, I usually go into mouse and trackpad and make sure everything's the way I want it. And for this case, everything does seem to be how I want it. Check your sound. You can go through just about everything. Personally, everything just seems to be how I want it as it currently stands, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that and move on to Software Manager. Please note, I did launch this already because I had to download OBS, but the first time you do it, it will need to get everything to actually show it to you. So make sure you're connected to the internet. And the last step, at least from the welcome screen, is to make sure your firewall is turned on. So hit be launched, type in your password, hit enter, and then choose what profile you're at. So if you're at home, have it at home, and press this in status. I usually just leave it as a default. It works just fine for me. And now, as you note, we have this little clipboard here. So if you click it, it'll do a system check, and then in my case, it tells me to install a language pack. So I'm gonna do it, and it's going to download it and install. So enter your password when prompted, and it'll run it again, and it'll tell you everything should be good. Another thing I like to do, if I'm going out and about, this is a really cool feature. It actually has mux switch controls if your laptop supports it built in. So I can go switch to AMD or switch to only using NVIDIA. It's rather nice. After that, it's completely open to you on what you want to do. So if you would like to install Lutris, I have a guide for that. I'll link that should be just about it. Everything should just work outside of the box now. You got all the hard stuff over, and now it's time to actually enjoy Linux Mint. I hope you enjoyed this video. If not, go ahead and tell me why. Correct me if I was wrong about something. I'm open to criticism. If you enjoyed it, hit the like and subscribe button. And if you are up to it, you can share it too. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.